Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me, inviting me. I am so delighted to be here. I am thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with you about something I'm passionate about, something that has impacted all our lives, my life, your life, but I think something that we collectively can impact. I mean, you're all smart, you're here, and I think if we work together, we can actually make things better. Conferences like this that are small are amazing because they allow us to really talk, interact, and really come together. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to just kind of give you a picture of global supply chains, where we are. I wanted to look at what went wrong and why, and what's different today. I'm going to start out with that, but also what we can do to actually improve things. And one of the things, and this is why I'm so happy to be here, we can't be siloed. We have to work together. We have to work across functions, across areas. It's imperative, and it's up to us to really make the world better. Otherwise, we're going to be back to where we were, and none of us want to be locked down again, okay, or have shortages. I want to start out with what is different today. What I want to underscore here, I want to explain two factors that are actually such that today is really different. We are in a very different era, and what I've observed is that most people, businesses, academics like us, have not really internalized that we really are in a very different era. And there are two factors I'm going to share with you that are making it so. I want to look at what has made these chains so vulnerable and why it's important for us to really be able to understand that, why it matters. I'm going to talk to you about what I believe is the answer. It's the human-machine partnership. And there's really a lot of issues there that I think all of us can work on. And then I want to talk about leadership in the new normal, business and what we can do together. So on that note, the first factor is AI. Without question, AI has changed the competitive landscape. AI drives cars, used in medicine, finance, across the board, creates art, right? AI is everywhere. It has changed the way we work, the way we play, the way we talk. It has changed everything. But there is this assumption, and I see this, I know this. How do I know? I know because I researched this. I've been doing this research for about 8 years now, and I'm literally doing it in an ongoing basis. The assumption is that being competitive in this landscape means getting AI, acquiring the tech. It's a plug and play, you acquire it. I see it with businesses all the time. If we can just purchase the tech and acquire it like some old process that we used to with old processes, we're going to solve everything. I can tell you, I have worked with hundreds of companies in the work that I'm doing, and really the reality is really less about the tech itself. It's really about the people. And that is really a hard thing to grasp, that when you acquire the tech, you really need to wrap it around your people. And you have to enhance human skills, people skills. And that is the one thing that is constantly missing, continues to be missing. I mean, look at the talent shortages that we keep hearing about, and we keep missing the part that we have to integrate these two together. So while we look at what AI can do, and we marvel at it, my own research, I have to tell you, started this way. We were captivated by what AI can do. We wanted to go into companies and see all the marvels it can do. Every single company that we talked to told us that what made it for them, what made them leaders, was people. It wasn't AI. And after a while, and I'm not an org behavior person, I constantly heard change management, and I heard integrating people. And it was really eye-opening for me. The other thing that is different is COVID. COVID started this. It was really this massive economic fallout in every way. And before COVID, most of us assumed that we pressed a button on Amazon and goods arrived, and we really didn't even think about how that happened. And suddenly we realized that, wow, there's this long supply chain, and wait, something happens in this process, and I'm not getting my stuff. And you know, some of that stuff could be comical, like toilet paper, but most of it was actually quite serious. Medications and the various items, the various shortages that really didn't abate. And part of it is that we had shocks on both ends of the chain. You know, the issue is we've always had shocks. They were local. And usually what happened after a week or two, they were fixed, corrected, and you and I didn't really feel it. Today, it is different. But the problem is that we've never really come out of it. And instead of coming out of this one shock, well, what has happened? What's happened is we are bombarded with other shocks right now, right? And so you have this collision of events going on. Hurricane Ian, you know, just to mention one, geopolitics, and so forth. What does that mean? What it means is that old school ways of doing things are not going to work in this new normal. They're not. And it is very important to really accept, to internalize it. When I was asked to speak here, I was so happy because I had the chance to meet people in different areas that I could learn from and that we could work together. Because you know what happened is right before COVID, I was in Boston. And I remember talking to a company, we were talking about AI. And of course, admiring and marveling what AI can do, right? Fast forward 2 months later, I am in lockdown, like the rest of you, and there's a New York Times article, and it's telling me how to sew my own mask. And I remember thinking, how did that happen? I mean, we were talking about Sophia the robot a few months ago, and now I'm having to sew my own mask? I mean, what has happened? How do we go so primitive? I don't want to go back to that. And I know you don't either. And the way it's going to help us is if we work together and not allow that. And if we continue staying in our silos, well, we could end up back there. And I personally don't want that. So what's different today is we have these hazards. And what's happened is they're happening at the same time. So while companies haven't really bounced back from COVID, you've got the enterprise. You had COVID, you have geopolitics. I mean, we can dissect that, right? I mean, Ukraine supplies neon. Neon is used to make chips. You probably know that. We have a shortage of chips. No one is talking about little things like that, okay? Because it's sort of somewhere out there, tier 4, tier 5 in the supply chain. But that's just one little item, and there's thousands of them, economic areas. Just look at the UK and the latest news. How is that going to propagate and play out, right? Climate change. I don't have to tell you about that. I think we're actually waking up to the various impacts of all of it. So what does that mean? There's no end to hazards in sight. And what we are having is these cascading failures. It's really up to us to really help along. So what I want to do is I want to break this misconception about what this really is. So most of us think supply chain, what is this? Well, first of all, most people before COVID didn't even know what it was, right? They didn't know what it was. They just assumed that we just sort of moved boxes, which is my pet peeve. I mean, I really dislike that because it's a really very meta system concept. And then after COVID, most people thought, well, it's this linear flow, right? You acquire, you get materials, and you ship it to a factory, and somebody does something, and then you go to your Starbucks, and you pick up the coffee, and we're done, right? And in a very simplified way, that is true, okay? So Starbucks, the coffee might start as a pile of coffee beans in Guatemala with a farmer, and then it's put in burlap bags, and it goes in a barge, and it's shipped to a roastery, and then it again gets put in bags, and it's sent to your local Starbucks, and then you and I show up. So there isn't a magic tree in the back of Starbucks that is making coffee, and a stoppage anywhere along the way can make it so that we show up at the shelves and there's no toilet paper, there's no coffee. Okay. Well, really, that's not how it works. It actually, first of all, and I'm still keeping things very simple, but first of all, you have not just product, but you have information. Without information, there's no supply chain, right? We want to track, and we have to add information on top of it. Where's my product? But there's more to it. There's money. There's a whole financial chain going on. No one is shipping anything for free, okay? And the other part is that things are going forward and back. There's this, constant movement of products, information. You and I get our stuff. We don't like it. It's damaged. We send it back. Did I get my money back? And that's just you and I. But a B2B environment, it's on a larger scale. You are sending items back. You are sending items forward. This is constantly going on. When you think about a company literally having billions of items, like Boeing, literally has billions of items that are being moved and sent and shipped, and you have to keep track of them and who made the payment and all of it. But that's not even a supply chain. So what I showed you, that linear thing, that was not. This is way too simple. It looks a little more like this, and this is even simple. It's a pile of spaghetti, okay? It's a pile of spaghetti, and there's so much going on. Most companies that produce something supply to many other companies, like Intel supplies processors to many customers, Kimberly-Clark to many customers, right? And there are many consumers at the end. It could be a business, could be the university, could be me and you, it could be the hotel here, okay? And what happens is you have all these items going back and forth. So it's this spaghetti where there's information and money. And what else? Talent, the talent supply chain. You have people on top of it, and we forget that you have to marry together at the same time the products and the processes, the information and the money, and the people that make it happen. And that's why we see now shortages. Nobody, now we're talking about the rail workers strike. Nobody thought about that. I mean, rail is, it's not sexy by any means, right? Rail. And rail is annoying. You drive your car and you have to stop it. You don't really think about it. But rail is a big artery to all this stuff. Because rail doesn't deliver stuff that's really cool and neat and fun that we would go and the beauty and get it. Rail delivers paint and lumber and chemicals that purify our water that you might not think of. I mean, how cool are chemicals that purify water? They don't sound sexy or cool, but let me tell you, if we don't have chemicals to purify our water, we're in trouble, okay? And think about lumber and how many items that propagates into when it gets to a factory. We're in trouble. And there are workers that make this happen that you and I don't know about. We don't even think about, okay? And the truck drivers, well, what would happen if the rail strike happens? We're going to go to trucking, but wait, we don't have enough truck drivers either. So how are things going to get moved? What is going to happen? So we have the rail and we have the trucks, we have capacity there, and we have the technology and the AI, but wait, we're missing people. Okay, so there's all of this coming together. What I'm trying to stress to you, and then what I'm going to stress to all of this, it's very systems approach. We need a system, and we have to think big, and we have to understand how these pieces come together. And you guys can do that because there are international issues going on. Virtually everyone is global. Even small companies that produced, bottles need caps from China. So you get into tariffs and international trade and a whole host of issues. And you get into cultural issues in terms of, worker productivity, a whole bunch of stuff. And it all has to come together. You have to make it happen. So modern supply chains, as I've stressed to you, are complex. I mean, Apple has suppliers in 43 countries. One chip is developed, or the idea, in California, produced in Taiwan. It's sent to the Philippines to get tested. It goes to China to get added to the iPhone. That's one chip, okay, that does this route. So how do you track it? So you've got information, money, talent, and you have this spaghetti thing going on. What happens is a problem anywhere in this network just propagates and ripples. But I'm going to tell you what else is a problem. Most companies, and we've done survey after survey, believe it or not, most companies cannot track, that it cannot map their entire supply chain. Very few can. 80% cannot see beyond tier 1. Valentina, you're my tier 1. You supply to me, but I don't know who you get products from. How far deep is that? So I'm dealing with you, but how do I assess risk? If I have no idea if you only go 3 layers up, or if you go 50 layers up, and if those layers go to other layers, and if you think about it, things that are really critical, like chips, they're buried, tier 4, tier 5, tier 6, they're way up there, okay? Cannot assess risk. And that is a major problem. And it's really mind-boggling to me how short-sighted companies are. It's about like solving the immediate problem and, what's the payback period, what's the ROI, without thinking about strategy and the long-term implications and how this entire system works, and understanding that you have to have a system to make it happen. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. I just wanted to illustrate this to you because I wanted to show you, this is a Boeing aircraft. I can't tell you which one because I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I wanted to show you how supply chain works. This could be a bottle of water, believe it or not. It could be, think about what happened with PPE. That is a product that is simple. Toilet paper, how complicated is it? And we still couldn't get that right. So try doing that with something that's a little more complex. So if you look here, look at all the parts and look where they all come from. Japan, South Carolina, from Charleston, right? We're here. Gloucester, UK, Oklahoma. And it just goes on and on. And some of these, like the wings, you need 2 of those, right? So you've got to think of, what's called a bill of materials, and what does that look like? But here's the thing. It takes a different amount of time to make each of these. A different amount of time to move them, to ship them, to have them come together. So when you're making a product, you have to make sure that they're all coming together in the right quantities at the right time. That's why we had recently, you probably saw cars that are all done, but they're waiting on one chip, and they're not ready to go. I saw Ford, I don't know if you saw this a few weeks back, Ford cars were ready to go except for that blue logo that goes in the front. Now, I can't tell you, I don't know. Why can't somebody just get and just write Ford? I don't know. Okay, maybe they could, I don't know. But they were holding back cars because they didn't have that one logo, okay? So that's what we're talking about with any product. And any product that you look at, this is what has to happen. And the problems occur and we don't get it. And we are in this state where companies, even those of us that do research, think, oh, let's come up with the greatest AI, without seeing the entire system of how it works. this complexity makes scaling capacity hard. So in supply chain management, capacity is a really, really critical thing. It is so important, and scaling it is one of the most difficult things to do. If you think about anything, when I'm done, think about that. It was really funny because yesterday we were on the carriage ride, and they were talking about the difference between a graveyard and a cemetery, which I did not know. I see the nod. And apparently you start with the graveyard where the church is, and then there's overflow, right? There's no capacity issues. So then you move over across the street and beyond, and I thought, supply chain management, right here, right? But you know, it's the kind of thing, I mean, think about if you're having 2 people for dinner and suddenly you find 20 coming. Everything has to scale proportionally. That is exactly what happened through COVID. Hand sanitizer, right? Well, why can't we have it? Well, you have to have enough of all the ingredients going in. Okay, that is a major problem. And couple that with this complex chain, making sure that you have enough in proportions of everything. I mean, think about, you know, how many people are here and what would have happened if at the last minute 1,000 decided to come. What you would have to do, you would have to scale everything. Every business has dealt with this. If you make COVID vaccines, if you're, you know, anything that we're doing. And it was interesting to me because during COVID, I actually got frustrated. You would appreciate this. Ever have, like in class, when at first your students ask you a question and then you're patient, and after a while you're like, you know, I've kind of said this 10 times and I'm kind of getting tired of saying it. During COVID, I was called a lot by the media to talk about issues, whatever they were. You know, at first it was PPE, then it was the COVID tests, and then of course, if you remember, we had issues of vials and reagents and all of it, and then with the vaccines. And then could we get this? And I caught myself going, well, there's the issue of scaling. And after a while I thought, you know, can't the world, the business world, internalize that it's one concept and we have to understand what the supply chain is and that we have to proportionately increase all the components that go in. And if we can't, then we have to look at where are the substitutes. What can we use? Can we use A instead of B? Is there something local we can go to? This is absolutely essential, fundamental. The other aspect was this heavy reliance on just-in-time. And you guys have probably heard this. We had just-in-time, we have to move to just-in-case. And you know, again, it's short-sighted, very narrow. Just-in-time is a very broad philosophy in terms of eliminating waste. It is not just about inventory. I think so many businesses just realized, well, wait, I can cut out inventory, I can have things arrive when I need them, so I don't have to worry about too much. I don't have to carry it on my books, so I have great cash flow, right? And they really miss the point of what just-in-time or lean is about. But the problem is that the ultimate outcome was that there was very little inventory in the pipeline, assuming that there would be perfect cadence of goods coming in. And then when you have this stoppage, suddenly you don't have enough to really buffer and to get you through. So we have this complex chains, and then we have taken just in time to a real extreme. So there's no pipeline inventory, okay? And then there's a third element, and this one really, I think you guys come into play, and it's heavy reliance on offshoring. It's really international businesses. Everybody's a multinational. They use offshoring. And it really started out first, obviously, with cheap labor. It started out with really trying to cut costs. But what also happened over time is you had certain regions really specialize in certain areas. China, technology, India for drugs. So what happens is we are really vulnerable. So what happens now is you have very little in this pipeline, and you have this very concentrated area for particular items. So you stop any of these, right? You don't have anything to carry you over. You're also extremely vulnerable to the fact that you are sourcing from only one region ultimately. And that's where the whole thing is now. Well, do we bring things back? Do we go from offshoring to reshoring? And without really understanding how complicated this really is. This is complicated because you're talking about developing processes. You need technology, you need infrastructure, that we heard today. You need talent, okay? You need skills. Can we do a lot of this? Well, yes, but it's going to take years. And in many cases, we can't, especially if we're dealing with, scarce minerals, we're dealing with a lot of items that we simply don't have access to. So then you get into all kinds of other issues in terms of global trade and how do you manage all of these because we are in need of those items. So those three things coming together, they really compounded and it's not abating. And the fourth one, this is one of my personal pet peeves. When I was a doctoral student, I remember hearing all the time how companies struggled with the fact that, I was operations management and operations and marketing didn't talk. That was just this thing where, marketing did this, and marketing was the cool kids on the block, marketing and finance, and you guys. Supply chain operations, we were the nerds. I mean, I just remember that. I mean, we were not the cool ones. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with us. And I've even had students, I can't tell you how many times come in and say, I want to major in marketing. And I say, why? They go, well, I want to be like on Mad Men. I want to be on, Park Avenue or Madison Avenue, and I want to be cool. Nobody says I want to be operations, supply chain. But the reality of it is, it's a system. And in industry, the common lingo is buy, make, move, and sell. We think of it in terms of marketing, and we think about transportation, we think about operations, we think about purchasing, and then there's talent on top of it, finance. But the fact of the matter is you have to optimize the system. What happens with companies, we see it in the research that we do. We look at capability in technology to optimize one of these silos. So we have these massive AI, incredible capability for customer capture, okay? But if you are not talking, communicating, if you don't have transparency with the other functions, you simply cannot deliver what you are claiming you're going to. I can't tell you, there are so many companies that have gone out of business because of it. And companies are waking up. I heard the CEO of Wayfair recently say when they, kind of broke down the silos, he said it was an aha moment, this incredible moment of realizing this is what makes things function. So for businesses, I've always argued it is far better to get a lower technology, but to have the pieces talk to one another, because you cannot optimize silos. And as far as our research and the work that we do, we have to work together to really build systems, processes, address questions that will help industry break down these areas. Because just optimizing our little niches, well, that's great. But if you are not able to do anything with it, if you cannot communicate with the other silos, it's not going to go anywhere. And as I started this morning, we're in a different era. This is not 2018, 2019, not 2015, where we publish in our journals and we solve this one little tiny little niche thing. That's great and it is important. But we have to think about ways also is how do we link this to the other functions so we can actually impact. We can impact businesses, we can impact governments, we can solve the problems that we are all being faced. Because like you, I don't want to be locked down again, and I don't want to be sitting there trying to figure out how to sew my own mask. So we need new leadership. We need reskilling in this really very new normal. And that reskilling is reskilling us, reskilling our students, reskilling our research, reskilling businesses, offering programs to industry. We have to understand how to do battle of priorities. The reason is we have to make trade-offs. It's not any one thing. Executives, government leaders, they're dealing, I mean, again, UK, just a great example. I think, you know, how one quits after 6 weeks, it must have been horrible, okay? Our job seems so wonderful, right? But I'm sure that she had battle of priorities and all these things coming, and how do you make trade-offs? Businesses do this all the time. It's not black or white. It's very easy to do things in a lab and assume the world away, and then you have this little algorithm. And believe me, I've done this, okay? I have done this. It's not like, you know, I've always understood this. I remember my first foray into the business sector going in, I get beat up. I mean, I was silly because I didn't know what I was talking about. But you go back and you reassess and you go, how do I pick myself up? How do I get back out there? We need to enhance human skills. Human skills, those including culture, cultural agility, policy issues. I mean, all the things that go into working together across the globe, okay? And also something called domain knowledge. I'm going to stress to you, I have a few more slides down. I don't know where I am on time, but I'm just excited. I'm so happy to be here, so much to share. Think about COVID, okay? Think about domain knowledge. Domain knowledge is knowledge that experts have. In my own research, I've found over and over again how much value domain knowledge has. AI is only as good as the data. I have a few slides down. I'm going to share a little more with you on that. Even before COVID, even before AI, one of my irritations was dirty data, because it was so easy to get, you know, if we got data, we were so excited. I have data, I can do research, I can do this. But the fact of the matter is your data clean? Does it represent what the future is going to hold? It's extremely important to have processes to cleanse the data. We don't have that. So what happens is we get into COVID and we have all these models, right? Do you guys remember? I mean, we had the WashU model. There was the London model, Johns Hopkins. We had all these algorithms that were forecasting propagation of COVID. And by the way, when you're forecasting, you're not just forecasting. It's so easy to say and silly, oh, it could forecast demand. Demand for what? At what level? In what region? Are you talking about Eastern Europe? Are you talking about Western Europe? Are you talking about Charleston? Are you talking about, you know, what's the target market? How long is that? Is it going to be a peak? Is it going to be, you know, this sort of, you know, slow demand? So with COVID, we were looking to forecast what is the disease going to do? How is it going to propagate? So you're looking at when is it going to hit? Where is it going to strike? And then what's the magnitude of it, right? And the different models had different assumptions. They had different variables. That's why you have different models. That's why, like with Hurricane Ian, you've got the European model and you have the American model, right? And then, of course, students will say, well, why don't we just have one model? Well, the more variables, and you guys know that you add in it, the more potential errors you have in it. So you can't model everything. Ideally, you want to go as simple as possible and only do include what you need to, because you're going to get higher precision with it. We know that from research, okay? So with COVID, we have all these models, and before COVID, we get this incredible AI, and suddenly, we're just looking at poor Dr. Fauci and all these doctors telling us, well, you know, it looks like the WashU model says it's going to do this, but the, you know, Johns Hopkins says it's going to do this, but I think, and then we had all these, you know, experts and panel of experts with domain knowledge synthesizing, trying to figure out what was going to happen, what was going to do, and we just kind of sat there kind of wondering what was going to happen. You want to talk about silos. So I was following that, and then I was also following what was happening in with big box retailers, what was happening in industry. And it was really frustrating that these two worlds did not communicate. It was frustrating that what was happening with companies, these large multinational companies, they were still looking at historical data and they were still looking at models. And because, well, I don't know actually why, they weren't also communicating with the medical community to get a feel and to forecast better, to do better scenario planning, to be able to say, well, hey, wait, the historical models here don't really work. And it's not a point forecast or precision, but rather these are probabilities. And how do we plan for those probabilities given what experts in the medical community say is going to happen? And what does that mean in terms of products, shutdown, all of it? So one of the things is going to be not jettisoning just in time, as we talked about, but is to consider caveats to lean. You know, innovative companies, for example, can't just apply lean in a very, sort of this very basic, simplified way, but rather they have to think, what is the philosophy, what is critical? Maybe for critical items, I carry a little bit extra inventory, but I use lean for other items. We have to be surgical. We have to be prudent. We have to actually have processes in place and think through it and validate, not just apply randomly. And we have to redesign processes, communicate, collaborate. Have you heard of co-opetition? Co-opetition is really an important area. It's an important area for research, where competitors cooperate together when there are scarce resources. It ends up being a win-win thing. And we see this with multinationals in terms of really making headway in this area. Best way to do this is to combine experts with talent, with technology and AI. Why? Because they complement each other. Human strengths, technology strengths. I've already explained some of this, and there's actually something called Moravec's paradox that actually explains this and tells us is that what machines are good at, humans are not, and the other way around. And really to show you, they make an optimal partnership. You cannot just jettison humans, replace them by AI. So machines are just, look, they're great at processing large data. They are precise. They don't get tired, okay? They don't get cold. They don't care that it's Friday evening. They can scale. They have speed. But they're only as good as the data. They're only as good as the data. I mentioned that. Remember that. I saw Walmart after COVID. The CFO was talking about overriding the algorithms to decide how many turkeys they're going to carry at the Sam's Club, simply knowing that we're in a new world. Okay, we can't rely on what we sold last year at Thanksgiving. Okay, they lack creativity. Okay, we're creative, and if you think about some of the greatest innovations that have impacted humankind, they're creative. The Post-it notes. I can't live without my Post-it notes, my silly little Post-it notes. And that was really a solution looking for a problem for 7 years, right? You know the story, okay? And it made a lot of money for 3M. There's so many ingenious things, innovations, that were just kind of came out of human creativity because we are able to connect disparate things. And AI is amazing. Look, it can tell you it's a dog, can show a Frisbee, but it can't tell you that, it can't extrapolate. Well, there's a Frisbee, and what do you do with a Frisbee? What do you eat a Frisbee? How many people play a Frisbee? Can they play it on a Wednesday? Right, there are all these cascading things. It can recognize a picture of a dachshund, dog, but it can sometimes confuse it with a hot dog. And if you think about a dog, you also think about pet care, and there's a whole other things when it comes to business and functioning that an AI just can't do. We extrapolate. They don't have empathy. Empathy right now is so important. I'm on this board, and one of the things we do surveys, look at businesses and kind of where the economy is. And one of the things we've seen is that businesses still are, what do we want from labor? Well, they want higher pay, of course. They want flexibility, flexible hours, of course, okay? But they want compassion. They want culture. They want to belong to something. COVID has woken people up to want to belong to something. And AI, well, it can't do that, okay? So there are so many things that we bring to the table, and we need to combine the talent of people with AI. And that's really where I think where the genius lies. And this is my own research. I truly believe in it. We actually have a book, The Hue Machine. We defined a new enterprise form. We're working on a second edition now, hopefully come out in the spring, and talking to companies. But it's, we're seeing this emerging enterprise that combines these better qualities of humans, agile structures, with what AI can do, and really working together as partners, co-workers. One isn't better than the other. And there's this kind of collective intelligence that comes into play. And especially it is valuable. Imagine us, the different skill sets we have. And again, that's why I wanted to come here. We have different skills, and we combine it with technology, with AI. The kind of, intelligence that comes from all of this. This is really where the solutions are going to be born. The solutions to all the problems that we're seeing, that I had already outlaid with regard to geopolitics and COVID and climate change and all of it. It's not going to be one thing. And that is, I think, the really, really key lesson. So I went backwards. Here we go. So lessons, we need the systems view. We need expert technology working together, communicating, collaborating between functional areas. We have to restructure our systems, our processes to be more agile, to understand that crises are the new normal. Crises are the new normal. That's the reality, okay? And the fact of this drumbeat about, we're going to bring back all the sourcing, manufacture to one locale, it's not happening, okay? International business is the future. That's the reality. It's naive to think that you can just make everything in your nice little area. That's not going to happen, okay? So we need to come up with answers. And of course, continuous learning to really enhance these human skills, to enhance the human skills, because we should not really duplicate what AI can do. I already laid out to you what AI can do, the talent it has, or the capability it has, if you will. But we shouldn't try. I think we've kind of moved away from fostering so many of the human skills in terms of working together across cultures, across areas, in teams, and have wanted to really, I'm all about coding. I'm all about, listen, I'm an engineer in a past life, so I do understand that. But I think in this process, we have sort of moved away from valuing compassion, working together, working in teams. We've just sort of, I think, lost sight that is what we bring to the table. And I think that's really, really important. So some key takeaways: the greatest investment should be jointly in people and technology. And you should wrap that technology around the needs of the people, not the other way around, which so many companies do. You need to integrate these together. This is how you really are going to get the best of both, and how collectively we're going to actually solve the problems that we are facing. I wanted to end this with this quote from Eric Schmidt. I think is very true. Your future is you with a computer, not one that takes your post. So I wanted to thank you on that, and see if you have any questions. Yes.
How do you think the curriculums have to change in order to meet some of these particular types of demands that are new related to what we have right now in our curriculums?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and you and I both know that this is a challenge. I've always believed that we have to be prepared to reskill ourselves, and we can't be afraid. Don't get me wrong, but I think as faculty, we've seen this where people say, well, I've always taught this, okay, it's my course. Okay, we can't do that anymore. And I think that we need to understand that, if you look around now post-COVID, how many universities are losing enrollment, right? So I think we need to understand that, I know it's hard, but we have to understand we're not going to be in business if we are not offering something really usable. So I think, I don't want to get into the committee thing, but that in terms of, across areas, really not staying in our silos. I can comment, I see it in my own group, in terms of how hard it is to get people to say, hey, purchasing, let's be honest, today, so many companies use bots to do ordinary sourcing. So and I've talked to SVPs who say the things that we're looking for in hiring these people today are very different than what we asked 10 years ago. Before, there was a whole RFP and there was a whole process you followed. Today, what we are looking for are people that understand finance, how it relates to strategy, really looking at this in a much bigger picture than looking at it in the old way. So I think that we need to be very serious and put serious teams across silos together. But it's hard. I don't have the answer there because I've been there. And I know what happens and people dig their heels in. I think if we begin to look at some of the numbers and really understand that, if we want to stay in this business, we have to offer something that is vibrant, that attracts students, and it's not going to happen by doing the same old.
So I think one of the consequences of the pandemic is that a lot of business and politicians realize that the global supply chain can be fragile, so they call for moving back domestic production, local production. Do you see that will happen, or do you think that this will continue to be a global event, global supply chain, going to be reliant on offshore in the general trend?
It's a great question. So I am so amazed as to how ignorant our leaders are. I really am. And I really am, because I remember as a child thinking grown-ups have it figured out. And then you grow up and you realize they don't. They're so short-sighted. And this is where I think you all come in, through your work, through your research, because I don't think they do. I think that there is everything is in sound bites, right? They don't want it to be complex. They don't want it to be nuanced. The problem is, and then there's a problem, so we're going to get new leaders because this leader isn't doing it right, without really understanding that everything is gray. It's not black or white, and it's nuanced, and it's not any one thing. So it sounds really great. Doesn't it sound great that we are going to bring jobs back to Charleston? I'm not trying to pick on Charleston, but you know what I mean. We're going to bring jobs back. We are going to make everything here. It sounds wonderful. It's not going to happen. So I am really hopeful that I think it's you collectively, us collectively, that we can, through research, to do things that are impactful, that can make a difference, because they don't get it. And they still think that it's I think it was the CEO of Limited Brands a few years back said, we think that it's all moving boxes. And it's not. You can see that, I get frustrated with my own colleagues who see what we do as just kind of like shipping and moving. They don't understand that we have to connect to finance, we have to connect to strategy, we have to connect to geopolitics, and we have to understand that these are the pieces that work together. So to answer your question, no, I don't think that they really have yet internalized it, and it's, for me personally, really frustrating, and I'm really hopeful that groups like this can actually have an impact. Thank you for asking that.
Could you comment a little bit on the relationship between supply chain disruptions and inflation? It seems that compared to 6 months ago, inventories are growing again. And
Yes.
you would expect that to have a dampening effect on inflation just because of greater supply, yet it doesn't seem to be happening. And then the second part of my question is, in the longer term, if indeed manufacturers and other organizations are going to build in redundancy, does that mean kind of permanent increases in prices?
It's a
because that's
great
possible?
question. It's a great question. I'm gonna answer the latter one, go to the first one, because one's gonna feed into the other. So, great question. The answer to it in a nutshell is yes. And that is the part that I think people don't realize. People do not, the average person does not realize, the average person does not understand how lucky, what the luxury has been in terms of the products. I mean, think about fast fashion model, Zara, H&M. I'm in Boston, you go out, you see like Zara, H&M, you see young girls, buying a blouse. Nobody thinks, well, how do I get a blouse for $5? How did that happen? How is that possible, okay? So, to make things local, these are systems that evolved over time. It wasn't something that somebody just developed, but it organically evolved, being driven by this desire for cheaper, faster, cheaper, faster, cheaper, faster. So we go after cheaper labor, and then you have the consumer at the other end going, I want it, but I want it. I want my stuff, and I want it now. What do you mean I have to wait? I waited 2 days, but now I can get it in an hour. And it's this reality is just not sinking in that ultimately, no question about it, more local is going to mean much higher prices and much less choice. You are not going to be able to have 50 million variants, 50 million color choices, options. You're going to be very, very limited. As far as inventory, it is, so, I mean, obviously the markets and inflation, they're very reactive. They're extremely reactive. It kind of reminds me of a teenage girl on TikTok, or something. He likes me. How many likes do I have? It's like this immediate without really seeing that there's a lot more to it. The inventory problem has really been a lot because of two things. Well, actually one thing, which is really poor forecasting. And that poor forecasting has to do very much with what I had talked about, with really was looking at historical data and looking at a longer time horizon. Whereas the way things have evolved with COVID, I mean, there's been very much an emotional response through COVID, an emotional response to everybody, all of us, that we didn't predict. It wasn't just something that we could model. And so consumers first went from, okay, obviously, I saw this with like the CVS's and Walgreens and so forth, the kind of inventories, the sort of self-care, all the self-care products, huge. And then, big box retailers looking at inventory, looking at models, the immediacy and ordering, using order policies and order processes based on that data, but missing the mark because there was this very much a very quick emotional thing going on where first consumers wanted very comfortable attire, everything comfy, I'm working from home, and then suddenly, no, we're out. Now I want to dress up, now I want to go out. And it happened like a whiplash. And those numbers are just simply, just show that in terms of what's going on. And actually, as far as technology, investment, what's happening now, what was happening last month is different what was happening midsummer, right? We see those numbers.
This beautiful discussion, but thank you.
You're so welcome. No, I'm happy to talk with you.
Conversation during the coffee break.
No, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.